Can you find the car? This is a picture from 1900. Some of us have been around that long. 1913, can you find the horse? In fact, there's the car. I would point it out to you, but I don't think it matters. There was one car in the entire picture, Fifth Avenue, New York City. 13 years later, you've got a situation in which the disruption occurred. Not too many people would have predicted it to this extent, but you could hardly find a horse in the entire picture, and there's really one. So rampant disruption. One of the things that we're anticipating is that Bitcoin is one of those disruptors. The thing that happens is when Bitcoin and other disruptors come together into a collection of disruption, you get this multiplier effect that I think is very interesting because very few of us think about it. In fact, Peter Diamandis, the quote up there is 99.999% of humanity doesn't understand or appreciate the ramification of what is coming. And that is absolutely correct. I think we have this idea that things are going to be like this, that yeah, there will be improvements, Bitcoins will come into play, but we have no clue how big this ultimately will be. And a disruption is, of course, anything that replaces, in the normal sense of the economic boundaries, the product boundaries. We'll get into a lot of these in a very short period of time in this presentation. Number two, I just thought I'd kind of fast forward a little bit from that picture in the 1900 and 1913 time frame, and we have here 1985. Now, how many of you were functioning in some form or fashion as a young adult or adult in 1985? Enough of you to remember this stuff. By the way, do you know what was the largest software company on the planet in 1985? You guys will never guess. What? No, it was Cullinan. Cullinan Database Management Systems, Cullinan Corporation. They had a database product by the name of IDMS, which was a codicil standard. Why do I remember? I ran the company. That's the only reason I remember. But we had the first Super Bowl commercial. We had Bobby Hull on our board. It was a great time. Anyway, 1985. Way past 8-track into cassette era. What happened then? Had a little disruptor arrive, a cell phone. And I'll give you a little hint. This was the first half of the chessboard entry for mobile devices. Now, I'll explain that a little bit later, but just imagine you are here, 1985. McKinsey gets asked on behalf of the cell phone manufacturers, including AT&T, what's the market for this thing? Do you really want to invest in it? Is it going to move your needle in terms of the business? The answer comes back that in 15 years, expect about 900,000 of these devices to be in the hands of the consumers. Hardly worth the effort for AT&T to try to get into this business. Unfortunately, they were wrong. It turned out that in that 15 years, 109 million were in fact sold, but still on the first half of the chessboard. 120 times wrong. Trillions created in value. AT&T didn't quite participate at the time in which they could have. And there were lots of other folks that were predicting stuff that turned out to be relatively stupid. Here you've got at least one Ken Olson, Digital Equipment Corporation. Anybody use DEC equipment in their youth? Yeah, we kind of all did. Data General and all that stuff was there. That happens to be a picture of one of my collector items, an Altair 8080, which was sort of the start of the revolution, kind of where Bitcoin is maybe today in comparison. And of course, the DEC guy says, who the hell would want one of these things at the home? Some of these things are interesting. You can read them, but the only one that I like is the one about the IBM. I think there's a market for maybe 5 mainframe computers in the marketplace. Sort of a slightly off-base prediction. But you really repeat this ill. People just do not know what to anticipate and how to plan for the disruptors that really come in. Moore's Law has been in place for a long time, basically saying that doubling of the capability at having of the price, we're experiencing that left and right all over the place. However, now you enter into what might be called the second half of the chessboard as opposed to the first. Here you have less than 10 years ago. Does that make sense to you? Less than 10 years ago, if we were standing here, we would not have a clue there was such a thing as a smartphone. No chance of there ever being a business like Uber or Airbnb or any of the other things that have resulted from the availability of this kind of technology to power that business. But do you get the fact that 10 years ago, not a one, and now how universally available smartphones are? It's really stunning. Now I'm going to give you probably the most important thing concept-wise to take away from this presentation. Ray Kurzweil basically coined this, first half, second half. Anybody know the story of the rice on the chessboard? There's 2 or 3 different, a few of you raised your hands. I bet a few more already had heard it. But there's an Indian version of this story. There's a European version of this story. Whatever the story is, the fact is someone decided to get compensated, and to a monarch of one kind or another answered, I don't want much for what my services were. In one case, it was the invention of the game chess. Just give me 1 grain of rice on one of these, on the first space on the chessboard, and then double it. So by the time you get through 32 spaces on the board, you've gone through the first half of the chessboard. And that first half feels sometimes okay. And let me just give you an idea of what the first half of that chessboard in rice terms means. As it states up there, if you get to the 32nd square and you had doubled the grain of rice from the first to the 32nd, the 32nd square would actually have 100,000 kilograms of rice. Now that's cool. What's really obnoxious is that the 33rd would be 200,000 kilo of rice. And by the time you get to the 64th, things are moving along at unbelievable multipliers. Because what you have at this point reached a pile of rice in the trillions, billions of metric tons, and a mound of rice larger than Mount Everest. And in some of the technologies that we're dealing with, computing platforms, we're getting into the second half of that chessboard just now. And the impact will be illustrably just about the same as this rice example. I'll give you another way of looking at it. 10 years ago, you would have gone to the subcontinent of India, and I have traveled to India perhaps 6, 7, 8 times a year, sometimes for as long a period of time as 5 or 6 weeks. Love the place. My wife wanted to leave the very first day we ever went there. Couldn't wait to leave. Had a rat crawl over her foot. Was not a good rat story for me. And I talked her into staying one more day. At the end of 5 or 6 weeks, she never wanted to leave. But there wasn't a cell phone around. And India today has got a commitment from Reliance and the #1 richest guy running Reliance, Ambani. Ambani is supposedly the owner of the most expensive residential home in Mumbai. It doesn't look really that expensive to me when you look at it because it's kind of a weird shape. But if you look it up, you'll find it a very interesting home that he has. Anyway, this game-changing story evolves into where today there is an expectation that in a relatively short period of time, 4G will be available to every Indian citizen. A game changer in so many ways that it's hard to even fathom. However, while we're going to the 4th generation in India, the rest of us are anticipating 5G. And if you look at the amount, it's 100 times in terms of capability, in terms of speed, as 4G. Now we're talking about second half of the chessboard stuff. And it is exactly where we find that there are other revolutionary steps being taken. And an example is automobiles, which we'll get into a little bit. Automobiles are no longer cars and mechanical devices. They have become computing platforms, now subject to the Moore's law, not to the rules of mechanical improvement. But here's just a list of the converging 2017 disruptive technologies. I bet a few of you could even add one or two in here. But Internet of Things and sensors, you can't believe what is happening in that space. Some of you who are probably fans of this stuff on one or two of these bullet points do get it. Artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, deep learning, robotics, solar. Solar is probably the least appreciated of the disruptors that is showing up right now into its second half of the chessboard. Got energy storage. Problem with the solar has always been energy storage. Now it's there, maturing. Autonomous vehicles that drive by themselves. I happen to own a Tesla. I like the way it drives, even though it's not fully autonomous. I can understand why it's kind of clever and neat and people like it. I like it. But it's coming in such rapid pace that it's going to shake us as a society. 3D printing, we can print hearts. In fact, Dr. Atala, later on I'll show you, has printed a mouse heart. I got the thing, and so I was the chairman of his regenerative medicine board, ended up putting that in the Museum of Science and Industry. You can watch it, be printing a mouse heart with stem cells in the printer, in a 3D printer. The heart is printed and it starts beating all by itself. You can look it up, easy to find. 3D virtual visualization, virtual reality. I got a history there because at Platinum Technology, which I sold in 1999, we were a $1 billion revenue company, sold it for $4 billion. Had a product that I acquired from Silicon Graphics called Vermal. Very early stage, first half of the chessboard, probably the first or second square on the chessboard at the time, among many other things that were part of Platinum Technology. But anyway, you can see it today, rapidly multiplying in capability. And the thing is, we always have an excuse like, oh, it's just too expensive, it's kind of silly, it's not this, it's not that. But you forget that the improvements are coming along at that doubling rate because these are now computer platforms. They live under that scenario. Mobile internet and cloud, big data, immutable, permissionless, decentralized, trustless. You might want to even put blockchain in there too. Drones, unbelievable progress being made from it becoming a toy to a military instrument to now potentially being an entire disruptor of everything that we thought home delivery might look like. You got e-money, e-finance, Bitcoin, and of course blockchain. Universal basic income, few of you will boo and scream about that. But it's coming, don't worry about it. Connectography, if you ever have a chance of looking up that topic, you will find something that is unbelievably happening. And that means I don't care who cares about boundaries on countries. Boundaries are being formed around city groups whether they're on this side of a wall or on that side of the wall, they're an economic reality. Everything that can be decentralized will be, and then connected. And last but not least, the kinds of things that are happening in the medical field. If you remember Dustin Hoffman's famous plastics comment, let me say it to you here. Perhaps some of you have heard it again, but check out graphene. Anybody know what graphene is? Cool. A few do. Great. Anyway, it's carbon laid out, one molecule thickness, one atom thickness. You can stick it into silly putty and make it into one of the most sensitive medical devices on earth, because even the slightest pressure, that of a spider's foot, is registered in that material and generates a current that can be measured. Unbelievable stuff, this graphene, in all of its application. Also, early stage disruptor. Anybody know CRISPR? Anybody like CRISPR? Cool, man. It's like Java for DNA instead of machine code. You can make superhumans. You can have kids that do things that are unbelievably athletic. And guess what? If we don't do it, somebody else will. So it's inevitable. But certainly in its ethical version of producing changes to the DNA that can eliminate certain kinds of diseases, arguably still changing stuff that is uncomfortable, but at least you can get an incredible medical advantage using CRISPR. CRISPR, watch it, dial into it, graphene, CRISPR, unbelievable stuff. Almost the simplest way of editing a DNA chain, wipe something out, replace it, put it in, passes on genetically after you make the change. This is the fellow that I know very well, Anthony Atala. I sat on his regenerative board, chaired it. He's at Wake Forest. He's the one that does the 3D printing of the mouse heart. There are an enormous number of advances that are now part of this. In fact, there are now stem cells that can be introduced to such things as a sliced liver. Anybody ever heard of a sliced liver in a human body as a result of an accident, a war, how difficult it is to stop the bleeding? Dr. Atala has gotten it to the point where he takes a paintbrush. The Wake Forest folks just paint over the top of the cut, heals in seconds. No more blood. Unbelievable advances. I'm going to run through some of these disruptors in a random fashion because they're all coming together randomly, and you have to kind of look at it that way. It'd be silly to just go one step at a time. But AI is the new electricity. It is incredibly important in the context of the things that will affect us in the future. All I can tell you is that if you invest in this space, in the AI space, you will be rewarded well, because almost every single mechanical device, almost every factory, every bit of automation, every bit of retail is going to be driven by AI. More than you can possibly imagine. The timeline, very difficult for you to read it, but it shows first half of the chessboard, basically. Nothing like the advances that are going to be happening here in the next 10 years. Sensors, AI and sensors were one of the disruptors. Thousands of percent of increases and improvements. Anybody have an Alexa or a Google in the home? Unbelievable stuff. You go to the Consumer Electronics Show, everything including your refrigerator is in fact talking to Alexa. Alexa is everywhere. Amazon is everywhere. What's the secret that Amazon has? I'll tell you in a what was that? What Amazon has is it's discovered another disruptor. And I want to just highlight it for you, and that is you cannot compete with a company that doesn't give a shit about profit. That's a disrupting thought. All they give a shit about is growth and value creation. And in fact, I'm going to guess that all autonomous organizations of the future are going to give up profitability because it's bullshit and just go for growth. And those that can afford to grow and raise resources and become valuable, in spite of the fact that they never make any money, are going to kick the shit out of companies like IBM, who can't do anything. Or GM. What's one of the things? I'll speed up on a little bit. GM is introducing the Bolt, but they're asking their dealers to build charging stations at the dealership, and the dealers are going, fuck you. Give me the money. And GM is going, I can't do that because then I'd lose money and my shareholders would depart. Yeah, no shit they would. But they don't care about Tesla. Tesla doesn't ever have to make any money. They just have to be cool. And that is a disrupting technology like none other. Do not aim for making money. Just create value. So you've got this stuff everywhere, including the refrigerator. And now you got this stuff, I think fewer people than I think usually have heard about this. Anybody heard of nano satellites? Oh man, cool audience. Few of you do. You see these things? You can send these things up that size and create a network of communication. And I mean, the amount of progress, the speed has violated even Moore's law in terms of the privatization of this effort, as well as the things that can be put up in volume. And I would say one of the things is that India has really participated, just like China, in making this a reality. And here's the secret sauce to any of these issues. You can agree with them, you can disagree with them. You know, it's like if I say global warming, again, 2016 today just emerged as the warmest on climate. Everybody's going to poo-poo it and say it don't count. It doesn't matter whether it counts or doesn't count. What matters is who is going to create the technology around it. Because if the Chinese create the technology, they win. We can sit around and say, oh shit, that didn't exist, all we want. I don't. I happen to actually agree that we do have an impact. But I don't think that what we would spend on fixing it is necessarily a loss. It's a creation of technology that gives you a leading advantage. Drones used to be toys primarily. They used to be military instruments of mass destruction, bombing, targeting. Amazon lands the first drone with a delivery. Disruptor, second half of the chessboard coming up. Amazon, did you guys read this? Put up a patent for big blimps, huge factory blimps, stocked with thousands and thousands of drones floating over your city, predicting how much Alexas you're going to buy. As soon as you buy it, before you can hit the button on your send key, the drone is on your front door dropping off another Alexa for you to use. Gonna happen. Absolutely, positively. Energy storage, electric vehicles, self-driving cars, solar, and cryptocurrency payments all come together into a clump of disruptors that will revolutionize the way we work, the way we think, the way we do everything. Just a little bit of global warming commentary. I already made the point. It's not the global warming. It's the technology development that if you take a back seat and you go start mining coal again, you're going to lose your ass, especially to the Chinese, who are much smarter than we are. Energy storage, the missing point. Everybody says, oh, you can't do solar because, you know, when the sun is down, you can't collect. Well, you don't need it anymore. All you need is a little bit of sun. In fact, you just need about as much sun as in the worst years of the UK fog these days. And I'll tell you why. And you can store it at night. And 4-bedroom house can be 24 hours a day powered with this Tesla storage unit. And it's a status symbol. Put that on the side of your house, bring the neighbors over and go, hey, am I cool or am I not? I got one of them things. In fact, 15 of them on the other side of the house if you're nice, and I'll give you a peek. Lithium-ion batteries costs are dropping exponentially. Moore's law fully in effect. 14% per year over 15 years. Why? Because mobile devices showed up, laptops showed up. That spurred the development of that kind of battery, and there are 50 other kind of batteries on top of it. The projected cost of lithium-ion batteries is dropping precipitously. In various years, that's what you're going to end up with costs. And it isn't the only battery technology that will affect us. Tesla's got this giant gigafactory today, expanded it again. I think they like to fuck with shorts. You know, anybody who tries to short Tesla, he just has this game plan. How do I fuck them over? Ahead of the curve, getting into $250 for commercial microgrid. Even big power plants are putting up solar systems and collecting them in storage and then providing it to the network. And frankly, utilities of that size are kind of out of fashion. They're going to go away. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The battery factories, mega factories are coming. BYD, a Chinese company that makes some fantastic electric cars. I'm a real fan of BYD. All of them are adding in to the capacity of lithium-ion batteries and other batteries. Storage as a service. You provide it to the system. Just think about it in the context of storage in the cloud. What you basically do is you put the electricity into the storage system. It comes back and you get charged as if it was kept for you and delivered on demand. Cool numbers. Takes a lot of time. This presentation that I'm giving today is not long enough for me to go through each of these numbers, but just understand that the costs are dropping precipitously. Electric vehicle disruptors, probably one of the biggest to hit us in the next 5 to 10 years. What you've got is full service, full self-drive hardware coming in on these cars. This is the Tesla. It's not the only. Baird's got them as their top stock pick. In 2013, awarded the Best Car Ever award. What people thought, stupid manufacturers thought, is that people wanted to buy Priuses because that would make you cool. Well, it did, but that's about it. What people wanted was a gigantic car that had all the luxury features that made the guy next door who owned a Bentley look like a piece of shit. That's what marketers understand when they're dealing with Tesla, not when they're dealing with GM. GM is trying to deliver a cost-effective electric car for those people who are poor and want an electric car. It's not the way you build up a market. It's kind of anti-iPhone strategy. iPhone strategy was cool device, expensive, premium price, then everybody covets it. Same thing here. Scored 103 out of 100 possible points by Consumer Reports. Satisfaction and knowledge collection, bar none. Model S, 94% in terms of would you buy it again. Over here, again, highest capability. But the important statistic on this slide is there's billions, 1.3 billion already miles of self-driving data that's been collected. And that's the secret sauce, as well as the supercharger network that for most people is free. This is not a Tesla. This is the #1 Chinese selling electric car, the BYD. It's not the only Chinese electric car. Some are small, some are big. Thousands of these are being produced. At CES, Faraday introduced their autonomous FF91 electric car. If it gets to production, it will sure be a terrific, wonderful competitor for Tesla. The Chinese market, 34,000 as of July of last year, meaning for 6 months period. becoming a force. And in the context of all of this, I think Tesla accounts for only about 2% of the delivered electric vehicles. So if you think the Chinese are asleep at the wheel here, not that you on autonomous cars don't really care if you are asleep at the wheel, it's okay, but they're not. And the thing that got me the hint here is I've been going to China since 1995. I spoke at the People's Hall, opened up a technology center, was given a tour of everything that I might want to see, noticed the industrial behavior, unbelievable competition, I thought, for the United States. But recently, I saw that all of the two-wheelers are now electric. In fact, more than half are now electric, from scooters to electric bikes to motorcycles. Unless we get our act together on this, Tesla's not going to win the war all by itself. It's going to take a little bit more organized effort to win this. Is the electric vehicle disruptive? Well, you can come up with a lot of different examples of why it is. It's more efficient. It has all of this. But I have this theory that even though it's cheaper to fill up, I remember I drove up to the Hyatt here. They took my car, took it over to the Intercontinental Hotel to plug it into a supercharger, brought it back, gave me the front parking spot in the hotel, didn't charge me a dime, didn't charge me for the electricity, didn't do anything. Phenomenon continues. But here's the real answer. And it's one of the reasons I cannot stand hybrids. Hybrids are kind of like a transvestite car. It's still got all that equipment that you got to take care of. The spark plugs, the oil, doesn't eliminate any of the stuff. And in terms of the secret to why electric wins, you got 2,000 plus moving parts that got to be taken care of and do not progress at the speed of computing. Whereas the electric car is not that hampered with it. It's got 18 moving parts. Is it disruptive? Hell yes. You get better performance. In fact, it would take a Bugatti to beat a Tesla ludicrous mode P100D. If you ever want to get on Google and watch a drag race, beats everybody. 400,000 reservations for the Tesla 3. People putting down $1,000 to get a reservation. No product in the history of mankind has ever had a pre-order like this. Imagine Kickstarter, if you put whatever you wanted and you got 400,000 orders for it, you'd be going, that's crazy, it's nuts. This is a car that you get a pre-order for. So, how long will this 13-year transition take to electric cars? Probably less than 10. And there won't be a gas car left except for enthusiasts who want to do some crazy stuff. But think about it. There's a lot of things that change. And I'll get to those when we get into the autonomous end of the equation. This is just the obvious stuff. Ford is investing, not that I expect them to win. I think they're too stupid. Foxconn, here's a company that's got some things going for it. They, of course, make the iPhone for Apple. They have well over 1 million employees today. In a few years, they'll have 0 employees, they just announced. They're firing every last worker because robots don't fucking commit suicide and humans do. They're expecting to price their car out at $15,000. Beat that, GM. And you've got this accelerating J-curve reality for cars. Free charging for most. I can go just about anywhere, any shopping center. I get the parking spots with my Tesla that are ahead of the handicapped. and I get to plug in. Free. While I'm shopping, or my wife is. Um, and the car is just another big storage device that if you create a mesh network of all Tesla cars or all electric cars and share all of the electricity that they have across the network, think about it. Think about it. This is the self-snaking plug. And this is where I kind of think of Bitcoin. Your Tesla takes off after dropping you off, decides to go fill itself up, locates the nice place where there's an empty charging station, drives up, parks, the coil comes out, plugs it in, and then you pay for it, let's say. Wouldn't Bitcoin be like the ideal way to pay for that instead of trying to figure out how to automate a MasterCard to do that or something? Because the two mechanical devices, the two electric devices could simply say, I delivered 34 cents of electricity, I received 34 cents, consensus achieved, all the miners vote on it, it goes in the blockchain, and transaction's done. No interest, no complications. Machine-to-machine activity seems like ideal Bitcoin territory. Unavoidable conclusion. Now, we're in Florida today. I'll give you a hint of how big this is. No, I won't yet. I'll wait a little bit because it's a good little thing. Here's that centralized utility story. They too are going solar and using Tesla storage systems for the evening. And they are now generating electricity cheaper than they can from any other source. This is a sort of a how many jobs are at risk as to who gets the solar first. These are the current employment in the thousands. Autonomous vehicle disruption, another version of the same thing as I think solar is because it's one requires the other. Nevada approves autonomous truck deliveries. Otto, if you've heard about it, was just acquired by who? Uber. Very good. You guys are on it. It made a 120-mile beer run delivery without a driver. Think of the consequences. Just a little bit. Trucks get to be used 24 hours a day instead of 12. No drivers to bitch about, driving conditions and speeding. Just think about it. It'll settle in. So you just read the slide. All right. Waymo. You know who that is, of course, now? You probably all heard about it. That's Google's self-driving car, no steering wheel, part of Alphabet now. This is a 100-unit fleet that they're launching this year, built on the Pacifica platform, but still got the ugly stuff on top. If you see that stuff on the roof, that's old-fashioned stuff. That's disrupted already. Uber, roaming Pittsburgh and San Francisco. By the way, that was kind of cool. People tried to denigrate this by saying a driver, the autonomous vehicle, got into a running red light situation photographed. Well, that happened to be that the driver took over the driving of the car and was guilty of running a red light, not the car. It wouldn't have done that. Here you have Ford's expansion. There's 4 LiDAR sensors in here integrated into the roof racks. Those are even going away. That's old 2016 or January 17 stuff. Tesla capable of driving 90% of the time, but being delivered with full autonomous hardware and software upgrades are the only thing that's required. Yes, that is now the shape and size of a LiDAR unit in his hand. Used to be that whole thing on the top. What about the cost of autonomous vehicles? This is what they do. They check out everything, decide what to do. AI big in there, and NVIDIA big in there. LiDAR sensors, 2012 cost $150K. Of course you're not going to add $150,000 to the cost of every car and get away with it. It's not sensible that you could, except for very, very luxury premium. However, by 2014, the same stuff, it's $1K. And now, At CES, $90, going to 50 in volume. So now you get to, as a manufacturer, you get to say, what do I do? Do I give them the chrome strip on the back of the trunk hood, or do I give them LiDAR? Same $50. I think they'll appreciate the premium of a self-driving car rather than that. Okay, but this is the cost curve. Gigantic example of a computing platform rather than a mechanical platform. Think about this. 2000. Most of you around in 2000, probably mostly functioning in society. Here you have a 1 teraflop computer, fastest of its time, cost $46 million. 4 teraflops cost $59. You get it? I mean, like, that's disruptive. And cheaper to run on electricity because it now is one of the absolutely most efficient supercomputers. NVIDIA was one of the stars. I buy NVIDIA stock like I buy Bitcoin. You know, I mean, it's like they're cool. They're the next really, really cool company. In fact, that's kind of old news. But you don't see anything up on top in terms of the LiDAR unit anymore. It's all integrated. Is the market ready? Yeah, we got countries like Brazil, India, and China that have these incredible little problems. Self-driving cars would let you work and do your homework, do your laptop work, text, do all the stuff. Yeah, cool, you could use Facebook, Twitter, and that while you're driving. Now it would be legal and you wouldn't have a problem. Is it disruptive? Yeah, I think when you put all that together, very, very disruptive. And you've got on-demand car as a service. Uber starts it, but the ride-sharing technology is moving to the point where there's no drivers. Very inefficient to use a car. Many people who are millennials have already figured it out. You only need a car 4% of the time. You rent it, you don't buy it. Cost-effective economics would tell you if some asset is underutilized 96% of the time, something's wrong, it's going to get changed. And of course, that's what's going to happen. You've got the Uber self-driving car and many, many other examples. I could go time after time showing you end of car ownership is coming. In fact, there is a belief that we were going to reach the total number of cars at 2 billion cars in the United States, or I think it was the world. And now it looks like we would only need 200 million to satisfy the world's population for automobile transit if it was driverless and fully utilized efficiently. Do you know what that means in terms of what GM is confronting and Ford is confronting and Volkswagen is confronting in the future if we're going to go down to 200 million cars instead of 2 billion? They're gone. They're done for. They're cooked. Stick a fork in them. Solar disruption. Kind of been doing it. Now you've got, why do people tend not to put solar up? Because it's frickin' ugly on the roof. But if you get it really cool like this, you can not only bring your neighbor over and say, hey, look at my cool storage pad on the side of the house. Aren't I cool? But that roof is a solar roof. That is cool. And they don't break. You can drop a 20-pound weight on each one of these things and they don't crush or break, but they look exactly like tile, like you name it. And it's quartz. And each is a snowflake. Is that cool? Come on. Every single tile on your roof is different. Like nature. Cool. Advances. What cost $96 and $75 is now 36 cents. Graphene panels harvest energy from rain. So you stick that on the roof, now you got rain, it's going to generate electricity, sun, it's generating electricity. Just, you got the stuff, perovskite solar cells that are now thin as something that you could paint on a surface and collect electricity. Look at it in terms of the YouTube. Also, you've got thermal electric paint now. paint your house, it becomes a solar generating house. Cool? All right. And 2016 was the moment in time, where we probably crossed into the 32nd chess square, because prices are now cheaper than fossil fuel across the board. In fact, in Chile, you're getting prices like that. The curves are all going in the right direction. Energy by solar to 2030, off the charts. Can solar continue? This is the price of all other energy. It beats it to no end. I'm done? Oh, man, I was about to tell you that. 2 minutes. One of the things, I'm going to skip to this thing. You get the vision of this. What happens is that no drivers, no truck drivers, no tugboat drivers, no pilots of airplanes. You're an 85-year-old guy trying to drive in Florida. You go to your insurance company and say, I've got a Mustang. I want to drive it. And they say, well, your insurance is about $10,000 a minute. If you get an autonomous car, though, it's 3 cents a year, because it don't get in an accident. So you don't need insurance adjusters. You don't need repair people, because you only need a few of them. Autonomous cars don't get into trouble too often. I could go on and on and on in terms of the disruption. In fact, 70% of the U.S. population will be out of work in 10 years, unless you can get that coal miner to learn Java real quick. And that is the case. And the disruption spreads to the point where one of the items that I had on the list, basic universal income, comes into play. Because 70% pissed off people is not a good country. And you got to come up with a way to solve that. So, anyway, thank you. I'll take a few questions. They are investing in this stuff. I mean, you go through this on a global basis, and you watch what's happening in China. You watch what's happening in India, especially with the Jaguar brand. All of this, solar is being invested in at rates never before. And you never can give up, because what happens is, if you predicted that something was going to sell 900,000 units like a cell phone, you didn't take into account the fact that 10 years later or 15 years later, you'd have a smartphone out of that thing. And that's what is usually missing. It's just like, today it doesn't work. Well, so what? It'll work tomorrow. It'll be cost effective in 2 days. Okay?
I thought that was such an awesome presentation. And I'd like you to teach me how to fish a little bit instead of just giving me a fish. What are 5 things I can be doing a year so that I can be, 70% is knowledge here.
Well, Singularity is a good place to go. The brightest minds come up with a lot of these ideas. You got Peter Diamandis, who's got X Prize. Hell, you can probably pick most of this stuff by just surfing YouTube and Googling these kinds of technologies. Futurist is a great blog that is out that you can monitor and watch some of these new technologies. There are unbelievable amounts of this progress being made every single day. And the sum total of all of its impact has not been understood by anybody, even the folks that are at the real forefront of this kind of technology. Yes?
Mobile energy, the advent, I'm kind of looking at, should I be looking at lithium? Should I be looking at the supercapacity space and the development of graphene or graphite? Any comments on that?
That will be a really good answer in 10 years, because I'll be able to look back and see what happened and then tell you about what would have been the best idea. Unfortunately, you really have to watch all of this because graphene is going to have a huge play in it. There,
That was premature ejaculation.
we can say what the major trends are, but there are investments you can make in stuff like graphene today, which are going to win to some extent. Now, when the next better graphene comes along, could be tomorrow. And you've got to be able to say, all right, it ran its course, we've got some prototypes done, it proved the point, now we've got a brand new opportunity that, wow, yes, sir.
I had a question for solar. Now, I heard like two debates. One that says that some of the stuff that Tesla making shingles look sexy really is not the most optimal way to provide energy for the power grid. It's still these large pictures like solar plants where you can then transition the power and you can trade out as the
Yeah.
technology gets better. You don't have to climb on your roof and take things off. The solar panels are all in this big farm and they just sit robots.
There's a problem with centralized, like all centralized solutions suck, okay? That's a you gotta start with that. Anything centralized sucks. So what you got is a utility. One bomb shuts down too much. And we're at the point where solar can be created on your roof for less than 5 cents a kilowatt, which means that's less than the distribution costs it takes for free electricity to be distributed to your house from a central place. And it is not resilient to all the kinds of negative attacks that could happen. So ultimately, in 2 or 3 years, we'll be standing here, and the last gasp of the central utilities will be had. They will then be powering only Bitcoin miners and at a discount, and maybe a few factories that need that kind of delivery of solution. But the centralized utility is a thing of the past.
Are you seeing any advances in knowledge management and knowledge sharing so that humans can have any chance at all of keeping up with all this crap?
Well, one of the things that we talk about, and I talk about when I do this presentation is typically given to YPO, WPO audiences. In fact, I'm doing one in Coconut Grove tomorrow. And it's usually done to that audience, trying to get them to understand Bitcoin in the context and blockchain in the context of all of these disruptors. There is this feeling that I think a lot of the futurists have that says the human being is going to get into second place behind the intelligent AI machines, because as Moore's law takes all over the thinking capacity, the rationalization capacity that computers and machines are going to have in that second half of the chessboard, that the only solution is if we become part of a network where our stored information is retrievable in a way where it's almost intuitive. You don't have a device, you just think about it, you're part of the big cloud in the network, and you've got it, and you get that information delivered to you, and then you can take some action. But there is, of course, a lot of speculation that, we're just going to have to sit back and enjoy our, tequilas while the machines just do everything.